Here's the thing about faith. If it was safe, more people would grab onto it. Now, most people don't actually struggle with believing in God. What we struggle with is trusting Him when we can't see how things are going to work out. We like faith as an idea, and we like faith as some sort of abstract concept, but we get uneasy when faith starts asking us to move before we're really ready. Faith has a way of showing up and saying it's time to step up, and that's usually why we're still standing there being comfortable or waiting for your sign. But this tension, it shows up all through Scripture, and it's especially clear when we slow down and actually open the Bible instead of skimming past familiar words. In this Bible study, we're not just talking about faith in general. We're talking about how to study the Bible when faith feels risky, and why Scripture often asks us to trust before it gives us any clarity. If you spend any time studying the Bible, you've probably noticed that Scripture doesn't always give the kind of answers we want. We come to the Word hoping for timelines, even guarantee. We want God to show us the whole picture so we can make a smart, low-risk decision. But the Bible rarely works that way. Instead, it keeps calling us to trust. Stay with me here, because in just a moment, we're going to see how the Bible itself teaches us how to study Scripture when we don't have all the answers. We'll look at how a familiar pattern in a Bible story helps us understand why faith grows even when it's not clear what the next step is. One of the most well-known Bible verses about faith comes from Hebrews chapter 11. It's a verse many people can quote, but it often hits differently when you actually stop and slow down and study it out. Now, this verse says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Now, at first glance, that sounds comforting, it sounds strong, it sounds confident. But the longer you sit with this Bible verse, the more challenging it becomes. Because notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't promise. It doesn't promise certainty. It doesn't guarantee outcomes. It doesn't say you'll feel confident or emotionally settled. When you study a Bible verse like this carefully, you'll begin to see that faith is tied to hope, and it's not tied to trust or control. And that's usually where faith starts to fall apart for a lot of folk. We're comfortable trusting God when we can still see a path ahead. We're fine with faith as long as we can look down the road and say, I don't know exactly where this is going to go, but I can see a few possible good options for me. Now, that kind of faith, it feels manageable. But Hebrews reminds us that faith is about things not seen. In other words, faith often begins right where visibility ends. I've often said that the best way to find faith is to get to the end of your rope and hang there for just a little while. There's another Bible verse here that will help add some clarity to this, and it comes from 2 Corinthians when Paul says simply this, that we walk by faith and not by sight. Now, this verse is short, but it's incredibly practical. It tells us that faith has a way of moving through life without full visibility. You don't get the whole picture. You don't get the full plan. Most of the time, you don't even get the next 5 steps. You get just enough light for the next step. And that's where faith starts to feel uncomfortable. And it's not because God is unreliable, but rather because faith removes our ability to manage the situation. It takes away the spreadsheets, it takes away our backup plans, it takes away our sense of control. And faith forces us to rely instead of calculate. And if we're honest, most of us prefer calculating. We're comfortable trusting God as long as we can still see how things might work out. We say we're trusting Him, but we also are running quiet scenarios in our head. We're trusting God with one hand while holding on to control with the other. But the moment faith asks us to act without clarity, hesitation sets in. We slow down, we ask more questions, we wait for better conditions. Sometimes we even call it wisdom, when in reality what it is we're just wearing a religious disguise. We say we're just praying about it, when what we really mean is that we're hoping God doesn't expect us to move just yet. When you study Scripture carefully, you'll begin to notice that the Bible never presents faith as a passive waiting. Faith is active trust. It's obedience that moves before the feelings ever catch up. That's why faith often feels risky. It asks you to move while your heart is still unsettled. It invites you to step out while your questions are unanswered. There's something we see again and again when we read through a Bible story. The people God uses most often don't have the full picture. They simply take the next step that's in front of them. Now think about it like this. Nobody ever questions their ability to swim while you're standing in the shallow end of the pool. It's when the water gets deep and your feet can't touch the bottom that you find out whether you actually know how to swim or not. And faith works exactly in the same way. As long as life feels manageable, faith feels easy. But when the water gets deep, when the situation stretches beyond your ability to control it, that's when faith becomes real. And if that's where you are right now, that doesn't mean you're failing. It probably means you're right where faith is meant to operate. If faith feels risky in this season, take heart. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It likely means you're doing it honestly. And this is why learning how to study the Bible matters. Scripture isn't just giving us answers, it's training us to trust God when the outcome isn't clear. Biblical faith doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with trust. Trust says, God, I don't see the whole picture, but I know who you are. It says that I don't know how this is going to unfold, but I believe, God, that you are faithful. Walking by faith doesn't mean walking blindly. It means walking in relationship with the Lord, step by step, learning to rely on God instead of controlling the outcome. Faith will always feel risky, not because God is unsafe, but because faith requires surrender, and surrender is rarely comfortable, but it's always where growth begins. Now, if this Bible study is helping you learn how to study the Bible with more clarity, confidence, take a moment and just subscribe to this channel. And if you want to keep growing between studies, you'll find a free 30-day email devotional linked in the description below. Now, this devotional series is designed to help you renew your mind through Scripture one day at a time. Let's keep opening the Word together and let God do the work that only God can do.